Hello, welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I'm Marley Bird. This is week 4 of the Bernat blanket stitch along with our friends at JOANN.com. For the past 3 weeks, we've been working on this beautiful blanket made out of Bernat blanket yarn. I have taught you different stitches, how to change colors, and included a couple of tips and tricks of my own along the way. Today's video is no different. We are going to learn a fun new stitch pattern, and this time we are including some cables in the mix. I will show you how to both make a cable with a cable needle and how to make one without, so you want to make sure you watch the whole video. In this video, we will be using colors C and D for this section. Along with the yarn, you will need a good pair of scissors, a tape measure, a stitch marker, and a cable needle. Once you have the materials, the last thing you need is the pattern. I've put a link to the pattern in the video description box right down there below, and while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say. Okay, now you have the pattern, the materials, and your homework from the past 3 weeks. We can go ahead, jump in, and learn this really beautiful stitch pattern. This week's instructions build on the garter stitch we finished with last week, so you want to make sure that that is complete. We will be changing colors throughout this stripe pattern, as you can see, and what's really great is this 3-stitch cable pattern. And what's awesome about it is as you're doing the cable pattern, it really looks like you overlap the color from the previous color change over the new color. So you get this really neat, I'm going to call it like a color bleed that works up throughout the pattern, and it is so visually appealing. I just can't tell you enough how beautiful this is. As you're working up the pattern, you're going to see how gorgeous it is as well. This is only a 6-row repeat, which is convenient because you'll be able to memorize those rows once we work through them together, and it won't take up a whole lot of time. As I mentioned at the start, I will show you how to make those cable stitches both with a cable needle and without. And just like when we were working on the baubles, you can choose which method you want to use, okay? So no pressure to use a cable needle or without a cable needle. It's totally up to you. Okay, now that we've seen what we're going to make, let's take a quick look at the pattern and then jump in with this section of instructions. This week's instructions are similar to previous ones in that you have special abbreviations for the stitches we will be using in this section. So when it's time to do the cable 3 back or the cable 3 front, you'll know exactly where to look for those instructions should you need to. I want to point out also the gauge is a little bit different than the previous section we did. So make sure that as you're working along this section, you are getting the 10 stitches to 18 rows, okay? You want to make sure you're getting that. And this is called the Wild Oats pattern. So you want to make sure you're doing that. And then we are going to follow along with these instructions right here, starting not at the stripe pattern, but right here where it says break B. All right, so that's where we are going to begin. The instructions for this section have us begin by placing a marker at the start of the row when we begin working with color D. Then we knit the whole row. You already know how to do that. You also know how to do row 2, where we work the row with knits and with increases using the knit front and back increase. Why are we doing that? To make sure our stitch count is appropriate for the multiple we need for this stitch pattern. You know how to do that as well, so I'm not going to bore you with those instructions. Looking down here at my swatch, you can see I've already cut my color B from the last set of instructions. I joined my color D, here's my marker, I knit my row, I did my increase row, so I'm ready to begin my stripe pattern. So I am starting at my row 1 of the stripe pattern, and I am supposed to be using my color C. So here's my color C. I will tie that on to my color D there. And yes, I was supposed to cut D. It's unlike this one where we carried them up. It looks like we are going to be cutting each color change here. Now that my color is attached, let's go ahead and begin row 1. We start off with a knit 1, and then we notice that that is where there is an asterisk in the pattern. So that it signifies where our repeat will begin. So we knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn and back. We know how that works. We did that down here. So we slip 1 purlwise with yarn and back, and then we knit 4, slip one purlwise with yarn and back. And then we repeat from star. So we would repeat all of that. So we would knit one, slip one purlwise with yarn and back, and then knit four, slip one purlwise with yarn and back. The pattern indicates we will repeat this down to the last 2 stitches, and then we finish with a knit 2. Here's my knit 2 to finish the end of my row. And you can see here, just as when we were working on the previous section, when we slipped the stitches that were in the opposite color, we're going to have this look of let's see, this would be 4 pinks, a blue, a pink, a blue, and then 4 pinks, a blue, a pink, a blue, so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and move on to row 2 and continue on in the pattern. Row 2 has us begin with a knit 2. So knit 1, knit 2. And then it says slip one purlwise with yarn in front. So I bring my yarn to the front, slip one purlwise, convenient, it's the opposite color there. And then we're supposed to knit 4. So I bring my yarn back to the back and I will knit 4. Slip one purlwise with yarn in front. So I bring my yarn back to the front and slip one. And then I have to knit 1. So I bring my yarn between my needles back to the back and I knit 1. Now I'm supposed to repeat from star, so I'll go back to the asterisk in my instructions and repeat from that point. So I will slip 1 with yarn in front, so I bring my yarn forward, slip 1, bring my yarn back to the back, and knit 4. Bring my yarn between my needles to the front, slip 1, bring my yarn back to the back, and knit 1. Okay, so that's the repeat. You repeat this all the way down to the last stitch where you will knit 1. Continuing on in the pattern, the next row is row 3, and it says we're supposed to work it the same as row 1. So we're going to do a repeat of row 1. I want you to take note that as we slip the same stitches on this next row, it's really going to pull at these slipped stitches because now they're going over more than just 2 rows, and that's perfectly natural, okay? So let's go back to row 1. We're going to do this again. So we will knit 1. And then that's the start of our repeat. So here we go. Here's the start is knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 4, slip 1 with yarn in back, and then knit 1. We know that repeat. We're going to repeat that all the way down the row. Don't forget to finish off by knitting the last 2 stitches. Here we are. And when we carry on in the pattern, you will see that row 4 is done the same as row 2. So once again, we are going to be slipping these blue stitches, and it's really going to pull on the fabric, but that's what it's supposed to do. So don't freak out and think you're doing something incorrectly, because you are not. So row 2 has us begin with a knit 2, and then this is our repeat. So we will bring our yarn between our needles to the front, slip 1 purlwise, bring to the back, knit 4, bring between the needles to the front, slip 1 purlwise, between the needles to the back, and knit 1. That's our repeat, and we will do that all the way down the row. All right, so that's the end of row 4. On row 5, this is when we change it up a little bit and we introduce cable stitches. So let's use the cable needle for the first few cables that we do, and then I will show you how to do the cables without a cable needle, so pay attention. Row 5 begins with a knit 1, and then we jump into our repeat. So we will knit 1, we will do a cable 3 front. So cable 3 front, I will take my cable needle, I will slip this stitch, I'll go into it as if to purl, okay? I'm gonna slip it off and put it onto my cable needle and hold it to the front of the work. So I'm just gonna let it hang there to the front of the work. Then I will knit the next 2 stitches. And then I will knit this stitch from the cable needle. I prefer to put that stitch back onto my left-hand needle versus knitting it off of my cable needle. So I'm going to do that. I just put the stitch back on my left-hand needle and I will knit into that stitch. Now I need to do a cable 3 back. What I will do is take my cable needle, slip the next 2 stitches as if to purl onto my cable needle, and then hold them to the back of my work. So I'm just going to let them hang there to the back of my work. I will knit the next stitch, and then, just like before, I'll place these 2 stitches back onto my left-hand needle, and then knit those 2 stitches. See that? That is a cable. If you have never done a cable before because they have scared you, hopefully you have just had this mind-blowing moment of, oh my gosh, that is so easy. When you make cables, you're literally just knitting them out of order. So there's nothing extra fancy. You're just moving stitches out of the way so you can get to the stitches on the other side of them, and then you come back to the stitches you need to work because you moved them out of the way. It's really that simple. All right, let's move on in the pattern. We're at the end of our repeat, so that means we begin at the asterisk again. So I will knit 1, and then jump into my cable 3 front. So I'm going to use my cable needle again to show you how this works. I go into this first stitch, slip it off onto the cable needle, and I'll hold it to the front. I knit my next 2 stitches. I take the stitch on my cable needle, I place it back onto my left-hand needle, and then I knit that stitch. Pretty easy, right? Now I need to do a cable 3 back. So what I'm essentially doing is I want this blue stitch here to go in front of those. So I need to move these out of the way and hold them to the back so I can get to that blue stitch and have it be in front of those stitches. So I'm going to put those on a cable needle, hold it to the back, come over here to this blue stitch. See, I'm just knitting into that blue stitch. Knit 1. Now I have to knit the 2 stitches that I moved out of the way. So I'm putting those back onto my cable needle, or not, I'm sorry, putting them back onto my left-hand needle, and then I knit those 2 stitches. Voila! How easy is that? Isn't that cool? Okay, so this next repeat, I'm going to show you how I would do this without a cable needle. Again, you don't have to do it my way. You don't have to use this as a shortcut if it ends up being too difficult for you. It's just another skill that you can add to your knitter's toolbox should you choose. All right, so here we go. We're at the start of our repeat, so we begin with a knit 1. And our ultimate goal here is we want this blue stitch to come in front of those 2 pink stitches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my right hand needle and I'm going to, coming from the back, I'm just going to stick my right hand needle through the back leg of those 2 pink stitches that I want the blue stitch in front of. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm taking my thumb, I'm pinching this blue stitch literally just kind of up against my right hand needle. See, I'm just pinching it. So as I take my left hand needle out of all of those stitches, I'm not losing that blue one. I take this needle, come up to the front, stick it into that blue stitch, pull that over, and then I put those pink ones right back in front. So now my stitches are in order the way I want to knit them. So that's all I'll do. I'll knit my pinks. This would be as if I was just knitting them off my left hand needle. And then here's the stitch that would normally be on my cable needle. and I didn't have to move it. You see that? All right, so we'll do it for this one. So for this one, we want this blue stitch in front of those two pink ones. So I need to come in the front here, put my needle through that blue stitch. So I'm going to move it out of the way. I'm going to pinch the pink ones this time. Let all of those fall off. Put the pink ones back on the left. So all I've done here is I've gotten this blue one to come off of my left-hand needle, right? Because I need to move it out of the way. So that way I can put it in front of the pink ones. And now I can knit just as normal. Pretty nifty, right? Not having to always grab for your cable needle makes it a little bit faster. I'll show you that one more time. This is the start of my repeat, so I knit one. My goal here is I want this blue one in front of those, so I have to move that blue stitch over this one, and I need it right there. So if I wanted to, I could just take all three of those stitches off. See how all three of those stitches are off? Take my left-hand needle, stick it in the blue one, and then maneuver these two pink ones over here in front of the blue. The hard part with that is that these two pink ones want to fall away, so I'm just going to grab them with that needle, so that way when I get the blue in the place I want and put the pink ones back on, I didn't lose a stitch. This is really easy to do with this yarn because this yarn grabs a little bit, so I don't lose stitches when I take my needle out. If it were more slick yarn, I'd be more cautious. All right, so now we have this one. We want this blue one in front of those two pink ones. So for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to take all three of them off. I will go ahead and take my left-hand needle, and this time I'll pick up the pink ones first. And then I could just grab the blue and just say, okay, I want that one on there. It's in the right place. All the stitches are in the correct place. And I carry on. See? It's really not that hard. If you're ever going to try to cable without a cable needle, this is a good time to try it. As I mentioned, the yarn grabs a little bit and you have a less likely chance of the stitches just falling away. So why not? Give it a try. You don't have to use it, but it's worth giving it a try. Let's finish up the row with the last knit two. And then row 6, we are just going to knit all the way down, and at the end of the row we will cut our color C and rejoin with our color D. So it's time for us to get the blue color, if you're using the same colors as I am, into the game. So I'm simply going to knit this entire row. All right, so that's the end of row 6. I will turn my work and go ahead and snip off my color C. Remember to always leave a nice long tail so we can weave those in. And we can take a look at my swatch here, and it looks really awesome. See what I mean? The stitches that we did our cable with, those were our slipped stitches that we did. And so it gives this really nice illusion that we've cabled with two different colors, which we have because of those slip stitches. So it looks like it's more work than it really is, but it gives a really great visual look and texture. All right, so here's the cool thing. This is only a 6-row repeat. So I've just showed you all 6 rows you need to do for this section. I am going to show you how to do the next 6 rows also, because I want to show you a couple of troubleshooting things. What if you accidentally forget to move your yarn to the front when you're slipping a stitch? How do you fix that? How do you recognize that? So this next part of the video is going to be troubleshooting a couple things that you might run into as you're working along and you're repeating these 6 rows until it measures 12 inches. So let's go ahead and jump in to this repeat once again. My yarn is attached, I'm ready to go, and we begin with row 1. So I will knit 1, and then this is the repeat. The repeat is knit 1, slip 1 with yarn and back, knit 4, slip 1 with yarn and back, and then repeat. So I'm going to do that all the way down the row. We know how to do this, okay? But what if we were to slip the yarn and we forgot that the yarn was supposed to be in back, so we bring it to the front? How would we recognize that? What does it look like? Well, let's try it. So let's begin our repeat again. So it starts off with a knit 1. Then it says slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back. Well, my yarn is in back and I'm slip 1, but what if I forget and I bring my yarn forward and I slip 1 and then I carry on? I'm like, okay, I just get confused of which row I'm on, okay? And I'm going, no problem. And I pause for a second. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. What is this? That doesn't look right. Why am I getting that look? Well, that's because we brought our yarn to the front when we slipped this. We actually want that to the back. So we have a choice here. We could tink our work where we go into the stitch below the stitch on the needle. So this one's real easy to see because I would go into the pink, let the blue fall off, go into the pink, let the blue fall off, and then I can just undo that slip. See how I moved that float, put that slip stitch back, move my yarn to the back, now slip my stitch and carry on. So tinking back is one way, but what if you don't catch it right away and you don't want to tink back all the way? Let me show you how you would recognize it and fix it when you're on the next row. So I'm going to purposely make a mistake again here. You will not do that on this side of the work. I am doing it on purpose to be able to demonstrate the mistake. So I'm going to leave that one there and we will catch it on the way back and fix it so that way you guys know how to do that. I'm just going to finish up the row the way it's supposed to be done. All right, I finished up the row and we can take a look here. Let's see what we see. So we can notice our mistake. It's right there, blatant in the middle, right? Because it's that float is on the wrong side. We want it on the opposite side. And maybe we're like, oh man, I just saw this. We're at the end of our blanket. We don't want to tink all the way back. One thing I will do is I'll grab a marker and I'll mark it. So that way when I'm on the other side, I can be like, okay, that marker means that's where I want the float to be pushed over to the other side. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to turn my work. We're going to begin row 2, and when I get to that stitch that I just marked that I know is a mistake, I'm going to fix it, all right? So we're going to follow along with row 2 of the pattern, which begins with a knit 2. We know how to do this. We already did this in the pink, so let's get over to where that marker is. Okay, I'm coming up to the marker. I can feel it on my hands. It's right there, so let's get this one slipped. And this one knit, and this one would be slipped, okay? But see that right there? So the convenient thing here about having this stitch marker in it is I can move that stitch marker up here on the needle and use it to move that stitch, okay? So I've placed that loop that was around the pink. I've pulled it up and over. I'm gonna slip that pink one and I'm going to let this loop fall off the left, okay? See how it now is in back where I want it to be? So I've already moved my yarn to the front. I've slipped where I need it to go, bring my yarn back, and now I can carry on in pattern. I no longer have that floating in the front. I simply just moved it to the back. It's that easy, you guys. And the same thing can be done on the reverse side. Let's make a mistake again and show you on the opposite sides. That way we can see what you do on the knit side also. Let me get one down here. We knit one. All right, so this one here, let's pretend that I just slip it and I forget to bring my yarn forward. All right, so we're gonna see a float on the other side, just like we did. Maybe we don't catch it yet because it's a little bit hard to catch when you're on your purl side. But when you get to the knit side, that's when it's going to be more noticeable because it's in the wrong place. It's not supposed to be there, and you will see it. All right, so I'm going to turn. I can remove this marker now because that's fixed. I don't have to worry about it. I can turn here. I'm like, oh, look, everything looks so good. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on here? right? It's supposed to look like the pinks are extending up from the bottom here where all the pink is. Why do I have a blue right over here? Well, that's because we did not move our yarn to the front when we were on that side, and it made our float over here. So once again, I could catch it. I could mark it. Maybe it's nice and it's a tight float here. It doesn't want to get marked. All right, so I'm going to mark it, and let's work in pattern over to that stitch. So we're still, this is row 3, which is a repeat of row 1. So I just work in my pattern. I am coming up to my marker, which is the mistake. Remember, I marked my mistake. So here it is. There's my marker. Just like before, I can use the marker to lift that strand up of the pink one so it's out of the way. My yarn's in back. I can slip the pink stitch. There's the float. I don't want it, so I'm going to make sure it goes off of my left-hand needle. And now that float is behind the pink stitch where it's supposed to be. And I can carry on in my stitch pattern. See where the pink is still just a regular old pink here. Pretty easy, right? It's fun to be able to fix your mistakes as you go along without having to rip out your work. If you can fix it as you're working along, it makes for a much more enjoyable experience. You will carry on repeating these 6 rows for this stitch pattern until this section measures 12 inches from the marker. So make sure you grab your tape measure and measure 12 inches from your marker. You will end on a row 5 and with your color D, okay? So end on row 5 and your color D. When you carry on to the next part of the instructions, you'll see that it is a basic knit row, and you're also going to be decreasing stitches to get back down to the 77 garter stitches that we have been using all along as our separation between each of the sections of pattern stitches. Now that I've shown you how to work this stitch pattern and you're looking at the sample again, can you see better how those slip stitches are worked with the cable, and they really pull up over the opposite color and they just look really neat. So this entire section is your homework. Make it so that it is 12 inches long. You started with color D, you will end with color D. Don't forget to work that last row of decreases to get down to the 77 stitches. You already know how to do those decrease stitches. I don't think you need me to show you again. If you need a reminder or a refresher, go ahead and check out either week 1 of this stitch along, 2, or week 3. I showed it in all 3 of those. By this point, you should know exactly how to do the decreases. Once you have finished your homework, set it aside, and I will see you next week for the wrap up for the body of this blanket. And then in week 6, we have something fun in store. So I can't wait to show you. I am having a great time teaching this blanket, working with Bernat blanket yarn. It is so fun. I love the instant gratification with the big yarn and the big needles, and the colors are just righteous. If you are working on one, please share with me on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag HandmadeWithJoann, so that way we can see your beautiful work and smash your like button. I'm Marley Bird, and this is the Bernat Blanket Stitch Along. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.